not even long-term goals, but the shorter-term goals in terms of weeks. If you look at on a day-to-day basis, when I eat this kind of food, I feel like this. And I find this very applicable in my exercise. You know, if I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to train in this way on a certain day, well, let's try eating this beforehand. Wow, I didn't have as much energy as I thought. Okay, I'll try something else. Or, okay, that worked, but I'm jumping on the scale and it's not in my favor. I'm feeling a little bloated and lethargic. Maybe I need to revisit that again. Yeah. That's not something that you do every couple weeks. That's something that you have to do every day. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I mean, in my own, history the past week, I have noticed that I have been rather bloated and I've put on a couple pounds. And right now I'm in the process of listening to my body and seeing, okay, let's look at this. Let's eliminate this for a few days and let's introduce this. And so it's so much easier to figure out where you stand when you have that ability to look inwards. And I think that we're so focused on the end result that we tend to put our trust in external advice a lot of the time. I'm going to go to a doctor. I'm going to go to a dietitian. Don't get me wrong. Those are great options. Yeah. If you're really stuck, you don't know where to start. But once you've, you know, gotten into it a little bit, the merits of just being able to kind of identify things within yourself, it's tremendous. And I probably used to go to the doctor a lot more than I do now. I don't have time to go very often. I did go today to get some blood work since I have gone vegan. I want a little checkup to see, you know, I think that's important. And I'll make a note here to say to anybody who, for any reason, wants to transition into a plant-based lifestyle, I think it is important to get some blood work done when you're starting, and then a month or two down the road, and maybe again a few months down the road from that, just to see where you're at. And very common to be deficient in B12. You can fix that, but you can't know what's wrong unless you're actually seeing what's wrong. So, but once again, I would much rather be deficient in B12 and correct that through a supplement or fortified foods than the myriad of problems that, you know, are much more likely when you consume meat and dairy. So I'm not too concerned about that. And on that note, this slides right into my next line of questioning. So you mentioned being a vegetarian for 25 years before becoming vegan. Was that shift to vegetarianism, was that primarily for health or out of ethical concern?
Yes, actually, it's kind of gives away how old I am. But anyway, at the end of the day, it was really for ethical reasons when I just started. I didn't even know, like, to me, what I was doing wasn't really, I wasn't informed about something. It wasn't something that I saw. It wasn't something that I read. It was something that just kind of came into my head based on me being a very logical person, I guess, if you wanted to say it like that. I mean, when I was growing up as a kid, I remember we would go over to my parents had friends, and we would go over maybe every second Friday or on the weekend, and they would have a barbecue, and we'd all sit to the table and we'd eat barbecued whatever was cooked. But I always knew that I liked vegetables. One of the things that I would always have as a kid was lettuce or cabbage, just raw. Just give me a piece of cabbage, and I would eat that, and I'd be happy. That was a snack for me. But I mean, I ate snacks just like all of the kids. My grandparents had a shop, and they sold all kinds of different things, and we had access to those things all the time. So there wasn't something that was preventing me from having anything. It was basically freedom of choice. But then when I started to think about what makes sense to me, because I started to kind of look a little bit more inwards and say, okay, how do I want to, I guess at the end of the day, to continue living in this world, right? Do I want to take advantage of the fact that I can, and I do, use animals to eat, or take an animal's life just so that I could have something to eat, or because I knew that I could not do that if I wanted to. So it's always going to be that choice. It's always that red pill or the blue pill situation, right? And it all depends on what you wanted. So I said, listen, this is how I think my life will be a little bit more meaningful and less impactful on my environment, and to be more in harmony with the place that I live. And that's what I told my mother. I said, I don't want to eat animals anymore. I don't want to eat meat anymore.
What was her response to that?
And I remember we were in a car driving home, and I remember a smile. She just smiled and she said, okay, that's fine. Because you know what? She kind of understood where I was coming from too. I mean, that was a good thing about my mother. She always kind of took the time to understand why we were doing the things that we were doing.
My mother has been pretty good about it too, and occasionally I'll have the scattered conversation about my feelings. So once again, I started this purely from a health perspective. It's only recently that I've been giving thoughts to ethics. And once again, this show is not to examine that in depth. That's not the purpose of it. But we discussed that feeling of, how do you feel, not just physically, but mentally when you eat something, and not to be pseudoscience-y, but the energy of something that, has gone through some very negative experiences, to put it very lightly, and then to consume that's not necessarily a great feeling, and especially once you become aware of it.
What I think that point clearly kind of states is that we don't all see all food the same. Everyone will eat what they are comfortable eating, and they will not think that what they're eating is something that makes they wouldn't feel guilty for eating it, because they just don't see things like that. Other people who would say, okay, I choose to eat this versus that because I know if I eat animals I'll feel guilty. Not everyone will feel that way. And you and I feel, are never ever in a position to tell someone what they're eating.
Absolutely not.
Is what they shouldn't be eating.
I have a lot of friends who, I've been making more friends lately in the fitness community, and I know a few people that I've talked to on social media in particular who are vegan or vegetarian and love that and find that it fits in with their lifestyle very easily. And I know a lot of people who, they're not like the loud vocal pro-meat kind of folk, but will acknowledge that they do and that they see the benefits in it. And if that's your take on things, I'm not the person. Yeah. There are people out there who can do that in their own way. But where I'm coming at it from a health perspective, I have my reasons why I think it's going to improve the quality of my life. But if it's something that you feel improves the quality of your life, it's not really my place to come in and say, well, actually, I don't think that's the right way to approach that. As you said, it's not about telling people what to do. It's telling people to listen to their body. Yeah. And if your body is saying, ooh, I don't feel so good. Like, for example, when I was training for the Tele 10, I was quite vegetarian at the time. I was very rarely eating meat. By the time that I almost had it eliminated completely, I was about at the point of going vegan. And once again, that was a transition too. It was, it was cutting back before elimination. But I found that a few days, maybe about a week before the race, I had a meal that contained chicken. It was like a ramen kind of a deal, and I've since learned to make beautiful vegan ramen at my home. But I remember this meal, it was very heavy. I felt uncomfortably full after it, and it wasn't particularly large of a portion, but most of all, I felt so lethargic. And I think that once you have some time removed from it, you can really look at it from that perspective, because when you're eating meat consistently, think about, Thanksgiving dinner in this part of the world particularly, when people eat a large meal, containing meat, they're always tired, they're always groggy, and nobody ever questions that. Nobody ever goes, well, something must be wrong, I'm feeling groggy. It's just accepted that this is how you feel after you eat a meal. But I was actually going to ask you a question after this, and this ties into it perfectly, of your body can function so well on a vegetarian diet. And I think a lot of people think that vegetarians are these weak, scrawny people who are just fighting to get their nutrients, and it's just so opposite of the truth. I don't think I have had more energy than when I eliminated dairy and eggs. And meat also, as I said, I would just feel incredibly lethargic. How was your transition to vegetarianism in that sense? Did you find it improved your health in a noticeable way?
Well, actually, yes, that's a good question, and it's because it was such a long time ago. But let me just go back to something that you talked about earlier before I answer that question. When we talk about what people eat and what I mean, we exist in a world that's not a vegan world, obviously, right?
Of course.
There are so many people that take a really a big stance on the ethical side of veganism, and they feel strongly and it's not that I share those views. I definitely share the views of a lot of ethical vegans, but not everyone else will. And it goes back to my point where you could be strong and you could have these strong fundamental feelings of why what most people do is wrong, because they're actually using animals for food and it's contributing to animal cruelty. But unless someone sees that for themselves, unless they get the information and they start thinking differently and they start saying, if you want to go back to feeling that guilt, there's not much that we as animal activists or as vegans or as health vegans or as any kind of health proponent can actually do to make that person do something differently. It has to come from within. And it'll go back to, I guess, a point that I might have wanted to make when I said why I became vegetarian. I felt within me more than anything else that this is what I wanted to do, and it made sense in my head. And if ever I thought about, maybe I should go back to eating meat, maybe I should eat chicken, or maybe I should eat fish, I knew why I didn't want to. So that was my line. That was a hard line. It wasn't a soft line in the sand that I could just step over or dust away. There was always going to be that division of why I no longer do those things.
Fundamental principle.
A fundamental principle. And that is something important that a lot of people have to try to find within themselves. You could listen to everyone tell you all the reasons why you shouldn't eat meat. It could be from an ethical point of view, a lifestyle, a health or an environmental point of view. And unless you relate to something for yourself and you feel strongly, then what is stopping you from doing what you're accustomed to doing?
Now, I do want to move into your research, because we could talk about veganism all day, and I am looking forward to having you on the show again to discuss specific aspects of veganism. But as I said, I would like to hear more about your research. But before I get into that, I think it is definitely appropriate, given the time, that we take our second and final break of the hour. So stay tuned for more chats with Richard on his research on healthy lifestyle. Right after the break, Annii Gets Healthy will return after these important messages. We are back with Richard Kissoon. Back to Annii Gets Healthy, may I add. So we just had a really fascinating conversation about healthy lifestyle, moving into talking about plant-based diet and how that feels, and how that really affects all aspects of lifestyle. So my next question, after just talking about that transition early in your life, was going back to your life back home. Did you do your undergrad at home?
Yes, I did, actually. I did my undergrad in Trinidad and Tobago. That was a long time ago. And I actually got into a career. I was in IT. I worked in IT for like a really long time. I would say 20 years. IT, if you look at it, it is a service industry.
Of course.
Everything that we do is to make the lives of other people easier, because they use or they depend on the infrastructure that we create or on anything that we do. And if it's not working, it's our job to make sure it works so that you could do what you need to do, right? And I saw that as me helping people on that level. And it kind of got to a point where I said, okay, based on what I'm passionate about, maybe I could help people on a more individual level. It doesn't have to be for you to do your job better, but it could be to make you better for yourself.
So you went back to school and did